If the lights are out in Georgia, that means it's time for 2-on-1, the internet's top sensation, where two disciples theologians talk about the pop culture topic of their guest choosing. Today, of course, we are thrilled that you are with us, Deuces, and our guest Colton Lott is here too, but we should probably introduce ourselves first. Hi, I'm the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
Hi, Arthur Stewart. I'm very fancy. Gives you one chance, fancy, don't let me down.
Yes.
I'm Reverend Stephanie Kendall. I'm excited for today.
Yes, me too. Not only am I going to ba, I'm going to reba I don't know what baaing is, except sheep and goats.
Sheep?
Hey, you may notice we're drinking coffee if you're watching the video of this. Hopefully the coffee is going to do its job.
It is. I have faith in it because we're here to talk about Reba McEntire. I mean, I don't know. She's one of those people. She's like, you don't have to say Reba McEntire. You just have to say Reba. There's not a lot, but also there's only one.
Okay, so on that, I was thinking about this. Somebody showed me a stole they were wearing in a picture, and they said it's a one row. So speaking of only one names, can I tell you about our sponsor, Jeff One Row Designs?
You can, because I have a one row thought too. Please do.
Oh, good. Jeff One Row Designs is celebrating more than 16 years of making ordinary time extraordinary through the crafting and selling of liturgical textiles ranging from frontals and paraments to banners, altar accessories, face masks, and of course, stoles as well.
All things Jeff are beautiful. And I got to give a ordination stole of the lotus. He has this really beautiful lotus stole to one of our ordinands yesterday. And she's a chaplain, and I'm really just proud of all the work that she does. And it was such the perfect stole for her to wear for her ecumenical and interfaith and intrafaith work that she does. And it was just, she put it on, and it was just such a beautiful moment. And I remembered my own first time I put on my stole. And I love that Jeff allows these moments and helps create these moments to be really special. And so if you have someone in your life that you want to make sure that you get that special moment for, this sounds like a Valentine's Day ad. But whatever it is, these moments are special. So go on over to Jeff One Row, JEFFWUNROW.com, and use our 2-on-1 code promo, which is the best code that's out there for 15% off your entire stole order. And it is 2-on-1 15. So, and that's 15% off your entire stole order.
So you can order one stole and feel kind of fancy. You can order 3 stoles and feel very fancy. You can order 8 stoles and be the fanciest.
That's like fancy in the penthouse fancy.
Right. And Advent is coming, but you know what's coming before Advent?
So many things.
Yes, but in late October, our book is coming out. Using pop culture to tune in, find God, and get renewed for another season, edited by Stephanie Kendall and Arthur Stewart, is coming out. It's a collection of 12 essays on pop culture and theology. It's kind of the wheelhouse of this podcast. And our guest today, Colton Lott, is one of our 12 contributors.
Y'all, Colton's essay.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. Colton's essay.
We're going to talk a little bit about it because we would be remiss not to. It's one of all of the essays.
One of 12 best, but it is. It's a doozy.
It gives me chills thinking about it because it was so good.
Me too. Right.
Well, but before we talk about that, let's get Colton in here and make all of this stuff happen, shall we?
Yes.
All right. I'm just going to, I usually send a little warning, but I'm not this time.
Dun, 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 dun. I'm not even wearing earrings.
Welcome to 2-on-1.
Thank you.
Welcome. This is my fancy outfit for you.
Thank you. It is not missed.
It is. It's about to come off because it's also 90 degrees here and this thing is heavy and hot. But I was like,
well, that kind of tracks for fancy too. Hey, Colton,
her elegant New York townhouse flat.
Thank you.
Who are you? What do you do? And why are you here?
Hi, friends. My name is Colton Lott. I serve as the senior minister at First Christian Church. And I am here because I am part of the cadre of folks who are contributors to 2-on-1's new publishing project. Are you still watching? Yes, I was about to get the wrong sensory perception and say listening, but it's, are you still watching?
You know, whatever you do to
Wrong
engage.
sensory perception. I love it. Listen, if you listen to last week's podcast show, I also messed up the name of our book and also forgot what happened in October this day. So it's fine. You did great.
So, but you can go to Chalice Press, and I think if you type in "Are you still listening?" but more appropriately, "Are you still watching?" you can pre-order the book. It comes out October 25th. And Colton, you're in Oklahoma, and we're talking about one of Oklahoma's true treasures today, the Queen of Country, Reba.
Yeah, she grew up about an hour away from where I grew up, and so in southeastern Oklahoma. So.
You know, is it anywhere near Route 6975?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. See, I drove it to get to St. Louis from Dallas all the time. You could tell me the name of the town, and I bet I've pulled over to McDonald's to make sure I didn't have a flat tire in your city.
So Reba grew up near 69 and near McAllister, which is what folks will say, but she actually grew up near Stringtown, which people don't know, and Chalky, which no one knows. No. But
it just gets less and less. It's like what sounds like maybe somebody has heard of, and then this town.
And that's where she's from.
Right.
Right. But, I'll go ahead and this is the part where that part of the world has made a few country music artists. The other one that's from my hometown is Blake Shelton. But Reba, when she was starting out, would come and play a lot in Ada at the Ken Lance Arena, which is for rodeo, where my grandparents went and where my dad went and my mother when they were in their younger dancing wild years. And Reba would come and sing and play. And so after she had gone to her first award show, she came back and my grandmother was in the bathroom with her and everybody was teasing her that she shouldn't be in the bathroom with the common folk. And she reminded them that she was a regular person and did her business anyway. And so that's a little family lore of my grandmother getting to share that time with her at the Ken Lance Arena.
It's good to know that Reba McEntire is how Reba McEntire is. It really kind of is. Like she's one of the most fascinating folks in there. So we've done an episode on Dolly Parton, the Reverend Lori Walkie. Also, I mean,
so from Metro Oklahoma City,
right? So Oklahoma City.
I'm pretty sure Colton. I was like, I know Colton knows.
We can talk about Shania. We can talk, like, if you want to talk female country stars and you live in Oklahoma City, call us. Dolly Parton also has that kind of thing, and honestly, Reba being called the Queen of Country, I was thinking, well, what does that do with Dolly? And this isn't a Dolly Parton episode. I think it's more of a, is there room at the top for two people in country music?
Or
are they even of the same cadre?
I would say that they're not even of the same ilk. Like I don't consider them in country music. So I grew up on country music as well, and love Reba. Saw her in concert. Lost my ever loving mind. Brad Paisley opened for her. It was like 8th grade spiff was like in heaven. It was great, but I don't particularly listen to country music a whole lot anymore. But it ebbs and flows. And I feel like Dolly was of a certain era. And even though Reba is older than, some of the other artists that are even, middle-aged now, it's such a genre of music that like, I feel like once you hit a certain echelon, like Dolly does her own thing, and Dolly is incredible and famous and such a philanthropist, and like so much about Dolly. And Reba, a lot about, but it's in a different like realm. Like Reba went and did her show. Reba, she's kind of a little bit more all over the place in like direct pop culture, where I would say Dolly is within pop culture, but has been placed there.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Like, I think that they're both at the top. I just think that they serve two different purposes. It's like a Paul and Jesus and Peter sort of situation.
Okay.
Paul would think people think Paul's writings are just as important. They're just as influential to our faith in some ways. Arthur, I don't know if you know about Paul, but
I have a complicated relationship with him.
And yet I think most people would say Jesus top, right? So I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. I just think that it's not too far off.
I think that there's a way in which Dolly certainly does other ventures.
Yes.
That she seems to stick more to one concentrated way of being a performer and being a person loosely of importance in this world, where Reba keeps figuring out different ways to enter into artistry that puts her back into the conversation.
Exactly. And that's why it's like Dolly is there's a very focused, singular narrative of like, this is what we're trying to do here. And it's a little bit more not under the guise, but just like, it's not as flashy. Like the things that Dolly does that give back to the community, it's not necessarily like the whole thing. And Reba is like, put on your sparkle and shine. Here's my giant red hair. And I love her. Right. So I don't have a question. Keep going.
I have a question on that. As you ruin my final answer today, incidentally.
Oh, that's right. I'm also taking this thing off. It's 100 degrees.
I wish you kind of would have kept it like framing your face. For those of you who are listening, you're really missing out.
I really expected one of you to have a red wig, and so
I tried. Don't think I didn't try. I did. I was just like, we're gonna go with the fake fur.
The episode art, I'm sure.
So I want to talk about the night the lights went down in Georgia. So I will admit that I am a country music neophyte. I have no problem with it. I honestly, let me rephrase that. When I was a jazz snob, I used to say I won't listen to country or to hip hop. And oh my God, I missed out on so much by having that bias that I got over when I was 22 and discovered, anyways, that's all over the place. So country music, there's always a song from female artists that seems to be like I got revenge because I love a man. Not always, but that's kind of a genre within it. Why is that something that's necessary, perhaps? Or why does a story, especially with women, have to be one of this is how I'm strong but sneaky? I think honestly of Goodbye Earl, there's other instances of actual country music that's not so popularized, and this is what we call an Arthur question. Arthur questions oftentimes have a kernel of something and a big pile of crap. It's like looking for corn.
That's a weird thing. I'll take this as the woman in the room. I think that, and then Colton, I'm really interested. I think that that's not true. I think Reba's an incredible storyteller. I think women are all she's doing is really telling. I don't think it's you have to do this. I think women have been oppressed for a really long time. And so when you speak of your own life story, lived experiences, as she's going to do, as she's such a prolific storyteller, one of the things I love about Reba is that her songs really do kind of tell you a complete kind of story rather than some of the more abstract pieces of music and art that are out there. And so I think that that's just going to happen when you have women telling stories, because throughout our history, or we're hearing our sisters' stories. And so they just infiltrate how we understand the world. So I don't necessarily think it's true that every woman has to have a revenge story. I just think that these revenge stories empower us to know our worth sometimes. Because I've never dreamed of like murdering anyone, but like I'll sing out loud for Goodbye Earl. I'll sing out loud for the night when the lights went down in Georgia. Because there's something, and when you're in those spaces as a woman, I will name like in the concert space, everyone is singing with you, and there is something very moving and very powerful. It's like a communal prayer. Like what happens to us, why we need to be in person, like why concerts are so powerful, is because they do that. And so I think that if I had to gander a guess as to why so many country women have stories about revenge.
And this is the part where, but it's not just women, although I think the songs do better because there is that experience you're talking about, Spiff, but like one of Garth Brooks' more better performing songs was Papa Loved Mama, which ends with her murder. After infidelity. And so there are if you flip that heteronormative narrative, there are the other side. Neither of them, don't believe it or to violence this way, neither of them really feel great, but
no, exactly.
One of them has an ick to it, and it's Papa Loved Mama more than the night the lights went out in Georgia.
Yes.
So if we're taking this into the context of the church, perhaps there's this idea of the story, whether it's good or it's bad, is one that needs to be told. And what does it mean to have, and what I've noticed in the genre of country music, and perhaps it could have been better about it, is sometimes it's like the songs don't make you feel good, or they don't have to. The songs tell a story. Mm-hmm. Are we comfortable in the church hearing stories that are like, and this is how my life fell apart, or this is when I knew that God was no longer paying attention, or how do we embrace that? I think in a culture that we expect a happy ending in that, can Reba's music, can country music kind of as a whole help us tell a more expansive story?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that was how can it? Can I?
Yeah.
I think if Colton, you want to go, or
I'll let you begin, and I'll percolate a minute.
Stop dropping corn, I promise. I just
it's not, that's not a corn question. I think that's a really
mm-hmm.
I think it's an interesting one, because I don't think that I want to bring this actually back to the woman's part of this. Why it's so important to have diverse leadership in your church, because it's important for the ways in which we interpret scripture, it interprets community. And I think that will always be necessary to continue to diversify. But we're uncomfortable with the harder stories, but we're more uncomfortable with the harder stories about men than we are with the really violent stories about women. I would say we just omit and don't spend a whole lot of time there, but we use those texts a lot more because the men in those stories we've tended to lift up. Like, we're very stoked about David marrying Bathsheba rather than what that story actually is, and we love a good David story, and rather than making a qualifier of like, well, how they got together is not great. Even in this, I'm dancing around it, right? He rapes her. So let's just there you go. Good morning, America. But we're more uncomfortable. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time there because we have venerated David to something so much more in our faith. And we know that there is goodness there. Whereas the opposite isn't always true in my experience in church. We'll spend a lot less time nitpicking and going through the women's violence than we will holding the men accountable to those stories, but we'll completely kind of omit so that we don't have to deal with this story when we are really awful to men or other marginalized, or not other, but men, and in the ways in which they have been harmed by each other as well. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why we flag the violent women's stories. As poignant in a way that we give men passes and forget they exist.
And we flag them as poignant and but we flag them for all sorts of reasons. Like, oh, do you have, is it triggering? And we're starting to recognize that lots of these stories are triggering for women. Where I think the church needs to do better is recognize that there are other sides to these stories. Let us tell our stories. If we start flag them for the health and safety of community, we're starting to see women as people and needing, trigger warnings, and other people as needing trigger warnings because we're triggered. We're people, we're human. It's our humanness. But I think a church would be a whole lot healthier if they really started to dig in deep to some of those more challenging texts that especially hold accountable some of the people that we still find really valuable in our faith. Because that's the other part, is that you can't just write them off. That, if we operate in the currency of grace, then there's got to be a what's next after these accountability conversations, so that we can still love and be in community.
Right.
Sorry, that brought that way down, and I was not meaning to.
No, I think it brought it to the point where we can begin working constructively, which is to say, I agree. I also think that one of the things that these songs, not just the ones that have violence, is that they do a job of, as Arthur and maybe also you, Smith, have said, is telling the story in a way that, again, isn't meant to make you feel like something has resolved,
right?
Or that you feel good. There might be a feeling of this piece has ended, or this has drawn. There's a boundedness to this piece of truth, without telling the whole story, and that's important for the church in this moment. That's important for our lives in this moment. Because we don't need churches that just do the work of having the most inspirational hour of the week. We need this space or tangent, but I think it's worth it. What I noticed when I was in Surgeon Call is many churches wanted a preacher who's humorous. Probably not a majority, but enough that like I could flag like preaching style humor, like that would make you laugh. And I always think that's really funny when I read profiles. Or whenever people flag that as a good quality in a minister, that they made me laugh. And I have folks here that will say that I'm humorous, and I'm always grateful that they lie for me. But I think what that gets to is people just want to feel something. Like they want that moment where their heart and their mind and their heart and their emotions intersect in a way that feels like the truth. And I think that's something that these songs in country music, even these, right, the notorious sad songs, do for us. And that's something that I wish the church could do, instead of often this one note, how do we make people feel good, instead of how do we make people experience the truth?
Well, and your feel good can
we invite them. We don't make people. So some places do.
No, for sure.
We don't try to.
No, but I think I mean, Arthur's very funny. I can throw out a nice quip every once in a while. But I think we negate, or do we? Let me pose this as a question. Does the church negate joy, even though we have like Joy Sundays and things like that? But do we negate joy as a truthful experience? Like, is laughter, do they want the laughter because it breaks them from some of the harder truths? Or do they need laughter because it just as necessary of a truth to experience, and we just don't often allow that in the space?
Well, and to feel something is a really interesting phrase in there. And I mean, I got to actually read the bio that was put up underneath my portrait at my previous call, because a young man who was a youth when I was in that area is hopefully going to become the music director at said former church. And I was like, send me a picture of what they wrote, because I was terrified they were going to be like, Arthur Stewart was a mistake. They didn't. It was actually very nice. And they mentioned that I had a background in stand-up. And that's fine, because stand-up, if it's done well, is truth-telling. A comic says funny things. A comedian says things funny. And if it's only the joke, I mean, I could probably do a tight 10 from the pulpit, but if it doesn't make people feel both elated and a little uncomfortable, it's just somebody telling Laffy Taffy jokes. And those are horrible, and we should never do that. So I think it's to feel something. And was it Wilde? I think it was Oscar Wilde who said, if you're going to tell people the truth, make them laugh, otherwise they'll kill you.
I mean, so that's the truth of all of those songs, going back to those songs, right? The murder songs, the things like, let's take Fancy, for example, right? Like, there's a young woman who's like made to go into sex work by her mom. It's a real bad situation, but like, it is empowering. There is some, funniness to levity to it, or at least she tries to bring into that space. And I think that goes right along with the quote, where you're bopping along and singing about sex work and someone's real lived experience out there. And Reba's making, I mean, what a gift it is to be able to shine a light on something so intimate and so necessary that needs to be in the conversation. and to do so in a way that kind of gets just under the skin of someone without them knowing it. It sneaks in. And I think that that's what a good joke, a good, humorous line in the pulpit can do. It's the thing that kind of punctures the rest of what's happening so that you can sneak in and do other work. I don't want to say the real work, but because I do think that laughter and joy and all of that is a part of the real work. It's a part of who we are as people. But it sneaks in, right? Papa Loves Mama, he never hit the brakes when she was shifting gear, but he was shifting gears. It's a big stop moment in the song. It's not funny, but it is met with an uproar of people singing along and, doing the thing. And I think that it's intentional for a lot of these country musicians who have a more social justice bent, like Dolly. Reba does some of this too. Garth does. I know Tim McGraw does as well. And I would say early Taylor, because I don't necessarily classify Taylor now as a country artist, but
right.
She may, I don't know. Identify how you want, Taylor. Looking forward to the new drop. Come
on the show anytime you want.
Come on the show anytime you want, Taylor. Oh my goodness. Hey, Taylor, we know you're a deuce out there, Taylor Swift. 2-on-1's most famous deuce. No offense, Colton. It's definitely Taylor Swift.
I can be second. I can
exactly. At least how high of a scene we hold you in. But I just mean that those songs, right? That what some, and I would say kind of this 90s era country,
right?
What they did best were tell these stories that people didn't want to necessarily hear, but it did so in such a way that it expanded who the audience of country musicians were. And it was really intentional because it's no longer just like cowboy country and cowboy music. It's look at the broad spectrum of people that live in the spaces we come from, like Oklahoma and Texas and all the other places that have produced these incredible musicians. And I think the church writ large can do that well if we hold in esteem the ability for other people to tell the stories that they need to tell and let them do so.
And I think that it provides this cautionary tale too, which is one of Reba's songs that was meaningful for me in a particular time of life was She Thinks His Name Was John, which was one of the first songs in country music, if not the first song, that addressed the AIDS crisis. And when I listen back to it, I think, it's not sex positive. It's a lot of victim blaming. And it prioritizes the voice of somebody who might have fit more of Reba's life story. It seems to be a heterosexual woman who has contracted AIDS for a one-night stand, which could, right, like it, which is one type of case that I can imagine from the AIDS crisis of the 90s and early 2000s and 80s. But it wasn't Reba's story. I'm glad somebody told it. And I wonder what it looks like for people who are more directly affected to begin telling that story in a way that is artistic and meaningful and maybe avoids the things that she did as she tried to be an ally in that case.
And I think she's a much better ally now. She's grown. And I think she I don't know that she's ever spoken to it, but I think music also punctuates our time in our lives. And in the artist's life particularly. And so I think that it is a really nice way in which we might be able to look back and say, look at how this artist has grown. Look at how culture and society has gotten better as we think about what is performative allyship, what is true allyship, and all of the ways in which even that gets nuanced and needs to be more nuanced today. And so you get these things because there's this new country song out there that's I don't know the lyrics, but it's like a gay country love song. It's like, it's a normal love song. And it's about people falling in love. And then like the chorus is, but it's just two men. And it's a rug pull song. But I thought the other day, as I was kind of thinking about Reba, I was like, I wonder what She Thinks His Name Was John would look like from someone who has experienced that lifestyle, or not lifestyle, but not lifestyle, yeah, who has had that lived experience, to be able to tell their story authentically, like a good country love song that just also happens to be about queer people.
Right.
There's a fragmentation in country music, and I think there's a fragmentation in everything. So please don't take it as picking on it. I think about the the New England song. I literally it was my favorite one. Whoever's in New
Is
England.
it New England?
Yes. I just adored it because it was just, the snow can make you blind to what you've left behind, and it's kind of just this. I'll be here when you're done.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I'm not a crier, and that song makes me tear up, and I love it. But it's not, well, those damn elite rat coast Yankees are ruining everything. I would say after 9/11, perhaps particularly, country music fragmented into like weird jingoistic machismo, and then the thread of country as it continues goes on there, and people talk about old country and new country, and I don't think that's necessarily fair. But the litmus test is always like, is Lil Nas X country music?
Mm-hmm.
And the people who would say no are the people who probably also wouldn't be great about His Name Is John, or the song about two men. I saw a clip, I'm sorry, and I will shut up in just 1 second. I saw a clip of a performer. It was like, if it was up to me, and he's sitting there in front of an American flag playing his guitar, and his hat says "F you, Joe." And if it were up to me, people would go to church every week. And if it were up to me, the poors would all have jobs. Like, I'm paraphrasing lightly in this.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, since the church is fragmented as well in this kind of way, I don't think any of us identify as evangelicals, or if we do so with an asterisk next to it. What do we do?
Could you imagine if I was just like, yes, this is the time in which I am making the announcement that I am an evangelical now.
That's all the time we have on 2-on-1. This is the last episode. But no, how do we?
Country music is as broad as the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
There's the statement.
But,
right, so there we go. So how do we be a movement for wholeness, just as perhaps Reba is too?
Right.
Ooh.
This is an aside, but flagging whoever's in New England got dinged for not sounding country enough. I can't remember where I read that. I can't remember if it's the music video attached to it or the song itself, but just so you know, it did get a ding somewhere along the way.
As I was told on Twitter a few weeks ago, I'm not real. Like, I don't exist. Gay Christians don't exist, according to some D-bag on Twitter. Who I then called a clown, and he was like, well, I have more followers than you. So, okay, cool. Follow me on Arthur Abridged. But right, like, how do we, also, who gets to be the arbiter of what is or isn't Christianity? But I already had a question, which is, how do we,
what is it? Is it country music?
Yeah.
I mean, if we pull it back to Reba's music, right, you get, again, it's what I love about her being a good storyteller. Starting Over is a song that I, in this current season of my life, am listening to a lot. One, it's because it's the song that I listened to my first day of college, like when my parents like drove away. Like, it's just like the starting over again. Where do I begin? Because I've never been out on my own, and like while this season of my life I've been out on my own a lot, but it's just about, like, for me, right, there are these moments that continue to say, start over, you're gonna survive, you're gonna make it. So many of her stories are like, this in a lot of country music, just in general, it's this really bad thing, and it's not even bad, this life thing happened to you. Because I think we start to get into what is good, what is bad. No, there are definitely things that are way more sinful and way harmful, but some of it is also just life. Right. Not everything that happens to you in life is going to be great. And so here's this story about a thing in life that happens. Maybe it happened to you, but you're going to be okay. Like, so much of the journey of these songs often ends in the empowerment of, like, you're going to make it. And maybe not the end of the song even. Like, it's just that there is someone journeying well with you. I want to equate some of these really kind of more meaningful songs to some good pastoral care. that journeys well with you, and that you can recall on for other moments of your life when you need them in current moments of your life. And I think that the church can do that well when we utilize things that are meaningful to people. When you bring in a new musician and it's just, I don't like the music anymore, because that's every church ever. This is legitimately
louder.
Yeah, because it's like all three of us, I'm sure, have this experience of you've changed something and now you've taken God out of the church or whatever, and it's a for us it was carpet. I don't know if you guys know that God lives in a carpet. But also music.
Well, our dreams died on the cranberry carpet runner.
Well, do you know the reason there's a Second Baptist church in town is because red carpet's for heretics.
Right. And so I just mean all of this is if we can remember that we're supposed to start over, right? That we're people of the resurrection, that there are things that need to die to resurrect, that we can start over, and that we can do the hard things that we're called into of life. We can experience the challenging parts of life together, and we're going to be okay. Is something that I think country music can, but it also, again, pulls on your nostalgia strings, right? It's to say, this music was really meaningful to me back then. I'm hearing this music is really meaningful to you and really ties you to your youth or whatever it is. Let's find a way in which you can take that memory and bring it along with you, and we'll see how we can help spark that again and maybe something new. And by investing in both some of the traditions that are meaningful but not harmful, that move us towards where we want to go.
Right.
I think that's good. I mean, it's a presence that comes from country music. It's just be present in what it is.
And one of the things that's true is that things do, right? And this is playing rightly with nostalgia, which is the most potent of drugs. And that's saying Reba doesn't sing like she did in the 80s and 90s. Those songs don't get written in the same way, for reasons good and ill, for reasons about the market and about sensibilities and responsibilities. And we do have to live with, sometimes we play the old hits and sometimes we remember them or we use them in a way that helps us to re-enter spaces. And then sometimes that can move us forward. But it's often about time travel for us.
Yes.
One of the things that she did recently that is a gift and also a gift is her recent greatest hits, which is revised, remixed, revisited, where she took 10 songs that, as she performed them for an album like she would in a concert, she took 10 songs that were set to electronic dance music and then 10 songs that were pared down to sound more acoustic. And of course, the ones that are most interesting to me are, how do you set this to electronic dance music? Mostly misses, not a lot of hits. Some of them are really pretty good. At least
some real bops in there.
Who enjoys country music and rarely listens to electronic dance music. But, and that's a way that I think about, how does the church do the same work? How do we revise? How do we remix? How do we revisit? Because some things we can carry forward, right? We know how to do this in a different way than we used to. And so it's a revision. And some of this, we've never done this before. And so we need to remix it. And then other parts of, we love this and we can just take it with us. So,
I love that. I want to do a sermon series on revise, remix, revisit, because I think that's so, it's important. There are certain things of our past that we don't want to revisit. Hey, disciples, let's go back to our founders and revisit some conversations. And how do we do that in a way that still holds them in tender light with, who we are today and all of that. But I love the idea of, I don't think I realized it, the EDM that she was setting this to. But that's so important, because I think that we as the church are so afraid of failing that we forget to try. And so for her to say, here's my music, here's it set to, maybe people that like EDM are going to hear this and be minimally curious as to what is happening in country music, or at least in my music. And as kind of a, how do we broaden the conversation? And as you say, you know, some of them might be bosses, some of them are true misses. But she, I mean, granted, I want to say that she has enough chips to cash in of who she is and what she has done to do that. It's harder for small churches to take a big risk, I would think, because there's especially a financial risk, or something that, you know, a new ministry that might cost money, because they may not have as much to spend, and it may be more scary, but the payout would be exponential of if you get this new influx of people or gifts or whatever that might be. But I think she takes this risk that is really beautiful and should inspire the church to take more risks onto what might be, rather than just investing in what is and what you know to be.
Right. And that project, right, the remixed, is one where the mixers are other artists, and she credits them. And one of them is, in fact, an artist of color who is also queer, La Femme there, and brings other people into this conversation that's been going on for a long time, and adds their artistry and adds their gift and weaves more people into the story. And that's the part that to me is the most interesting part of that project.
So I want to go on a thread through this thread, because one of the things I did was intentionally listen to a lot of the Christian music of Reba, and I'm going to name this, and I hope this is the most controversial thing I say today. I hate "My Chains Are Gone." I do not think Amazing Grace needs a chorus. I do not think Amazing Grace needs a chorus that's "My chains are gone." And what's the right way to say this? There's an expectation in country music that one must present a Christian facade, not a facade. Obviously, like, I'm not judging Reba McEntire or anybody else's faith in that, but there's always that, like, when you think of, like, hey, who's a popular artist who's going to do country music? Like, you're probably not going to hear Taylor Swift do "Come Thou Font of Every Blessing," though it would be a beast if she did.
Imagine if Taylor, our number one Deuce. I really need a progressive Christian album from you.
Right.
And if you know, inclusive language around God, good theology, just throw some bops.
The most we're going to get is Brandy Carlisle. And that's marvelous anyway.
The most. I'm sorry.
The most we're going to get.
She is in a league of her own, my friend.
Properly. I think as we talk about bringing more people into the conversation, how do we do so when the standard of Christianity is the sacrificial, substitutionary atonement? It's about me, not about us, kind of cowboy church stuff. What does it mean that Reba pays homage to it because she kind of has to? And here's the question for the church that is in the main line. How are we influenced by the success, or at least the longevity, of theology like that requires us then to respond in such a way? What does it mean that we're playing defense, not offense?
Does she have to? I mean, it's part of who she is. I think it's a choice that she is intentionally making.
Right.
And I admit I am a neophyte, and I'm just asking questions as they come to me. Aren't you?
No, I've wondered that too. It's a long thread though. So on Room to Breathe, which was her 2003 album, she has one song that's overtly religious, Sky Full of Angels. Yes, I don't think that hurts her market share. It's also interesting to listen to her talk about her. So again, in preparation for this, I'm like, I think I know this story, but it's true. Somewhat in a similar vein to Dolly, is not really a religious person, but deeply spiritualized within Christianity. And so I do think it's the case that do not know Reba personally, would love to. When she's listening to this episode, I hope she calls me. You can get me at the church office at First Christian Church El Reno. But
you actually know where that is, Reba.
Yes, I know you know how to Google. But My guess is I would probably, if I were her pastor, I'd say her theological sophistication or her ability to discern which songs really reflect her most intimately held beliefs probably isn't a one-to-one.
Right. I couldn't agree more. You know, having not been brought up, we didn't listen to Christian music. I still couldn't tell you all these things, all these music that people are like, oh my God, I grew up listening to this and don't you just love it? And I was like, I've never heard that song in my life. Like, there's so many of those things like that people are like, that Christian music I just didn't grow up with because it was intentional. My parents did not want us to be to have other people's beliefs before we figured out our own. But Reba was safe space. And I mean, we listened to a lot of country music and there were some that was just, oh, this is just bad theology. And we knew that. But Reba offered a space in which it was okay to be curious about faith, but also like she spoke more about life. And I think that's why in my family, like Reba was very much someone that not only were we allowed to listen to like as children, like whatever you wanted to, good or bad. I mean, because some of those songs are well beyond when I should have been listening to them. But that they were, her faith through her music was one that was okay to a family that has true spiritual and theological and church harm, that like the children were raised outside the church because of it. But she gave me, if I look back and think hard enough, she gave me some of my theological language that I probably still use today without knowing it. But I'm curious for those of, because I served a church in Texas for 3 years, but I've never been deeply immersed in Southern culture. And that was when I moved from California to Texas, it was shocking to me how many people would say like, hi, I'm so-and-so, I go to this church as part of like their identity. And Colton, when you introduced yourself, you kind of did a little bit of the same thing, right? As we expect our pastors to do, like you work here, you're from here, here's where Reba's from. And that's like really important to the context of what we're talking about. Should or could, I guess, churches located in the southern states or who consider themselves southern, who have more of a country culture and narrative to who they are as people, can this music be used to liberate some bad theology? And have you had maybe any success in doing so? Like, so I'm thinking like sermon illustrations where you use Reba rather than where you use a Taylor, right? Because you're going to get a generation, and sorry, Taylor, we just keep using you, but you're here, you're already in the episode. But you know what I mean? You have a generation that can hear Dolly and Reba stories much different than they can hear Taylor stories.
Right. So if I can figure out the copywriting, I'm engaged to be married to Kelsey Cobb. She's also a pastor.
And she's a friend of the show.
And friend of the show. And
I'll see you in a few weeks.
That's right. And one of the things that we're hoping to do is imagine what a Dolly series would look like that interacts with Dolly and her music in a way in which Dolly has a way of unifying people and also having some of the same elements to some of her songs. And what would that look like for a series where we can intentionally think about the ways in which that could be a soundtrack to a life of faith and worship?
Good friend Lori Walkie can help you in that, because that's how Lori Walkie came to the show. She did a Dolly series and then brought Dolly on. So
okay.
just so that because it has been named in this space before, I just want to make sure that we name that again.
Thank you.
So I want to throw out one thing about this as we go into that, by the way. So Reba's first foray at the Grand Ole Opry, she was bumped. She got 3 minutes. She had to do a truncated version of one song. And it was because Dolly Parton made a surprise appearance. And just, it was probably before or after Reba was like going to the bathroom with your grandma, Colton. It was so like Reba wasn't a big enough name in there, but it's interesting when like things run up against each other in that. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet Dolly would hate that now. Like Dolly would never, if I know Dolly, you know, like I feel like Dolly would be like, I would never bump anyone. I thought I was just, you know, like obviously she's like, she knows that she's probably going to cut into somebody's time a little bit, but like an up and coming artist, she would never. She's too good. She's too good and pure for this world.
Right. Which, by the way, the first time they worked together was on this most recent album, and so very good. If he loves you. So they did a duet. Because Dolly sang Linda Ronstadt's part.
Because Does He Love You is one of my very favorite duet songs. And I think that it's such a, I think you just opened something for me. Because that song, think of that song as the division of the church.
Yeah.
That it's so much of, but does he love you? But does he love you? Like he loves me, like he loves me. If we put Jesus in the center of that, that is the church at this very moment. There is so much of, but I love it. Everyone loves him.
Right.
but
we have him now. Right.
Exactly. Like where do you lay that claim? And how in such a way that you're like, oh my goodness, how do we come back together? And I think the end of that song really, I mean, that would be a really fun sermon series to be like how the church has grown through our own understanding and personal. Well, that's a weird line of a personal relationship with Jesus, and being
an evangelical. Look at it. This is the revelatory episode of 2 on 1.
It really is. But
that's all the time we have today. No,
exactly. But I don't know. In y'all's churches, are you not hearing this? Because I am. Where it's like, but we used to do it this way, and I related to Jesus this way, and then you get the new people coming in being like, but I know Jesus too, and in this way, and it's that hard. Space to connect in that I find this current moment of the church.
Yeah.
I love it.
I was listening to that song particularly this morning, and the ways in which it's the same lines sung back to each other, but it has such different meanings. Depending on which side of this relationship you've been on. It's the same thing that I experienced between, so my church, our one true mark of diversity that breaks us from a very homogeneous congregation is that we are intergenerational, and that we try to make sure that shows up in boardrooms and programming and how we design our common life. And as right? Like it is always a hard conversation, particularly as we question, right? Do you really understand if you are not where I am standing in relationship to the church, to Jesus, to the life of faith, to trying to figure out how to be somebody following the way? In the midst of X, whether that's looking toward old age, or whether that is trying to rear children, or attempting to establish an identity as an adult, or what does it mean now that I'm in the middle? And that is a helpful tool for me to remember. So thank you for that gift.
Colton, this has just been a delight. It is so you're our early morning one, so I think I apologize that you had to help me wake up, but I am like fully awake now, and I could have this conversation forever, because what a gift, the depth of Reba. And we didn't even talk about like the expansiveness of also like the things that she's been in movies, she does TV, she does all of it.
She had a 6-season television show, and it ended on its own terms, and it was just ridiculous. I'm so mad we didn't get to Reba the television show, but it's understandable.
I watched it every Friday night with my grandmother, if you wondered how I came to be the person I am.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I truly, I come back for Reba the TV show. We'll just do it because that gave us some true gems, and because I too watched every episode of it. So, but again, thank you for coming on the show. We are just I have really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better in this way. And over the last couple, as we wrote together and talked theologically together and have become friends, I'm grateful for that you have given us your time here. But as is our tradition on the end of 2-on-1, we have one final question, which is what biblical theme, genre, book, person, verse, whatever are you most reminded of by Reba?
I can't shake that she reminds me of the Pentecost story, which is taking this this holiday that is not that is part of Judaism, understanding it in a different way as followers of Jesus, and then imagining what comes next. And I think that that's the arc of Reba's career and so much of her music, right? That starting over piece, that continuity. But also, as she went from music to being a true leader in what music videos could do, especially for country music, and then acting and stage. And she's now starting her hospitality career in Atoka, Oklahoma. And so with Reba's Place, but that same sense of transformation and continuity that we see in the Pentecost story is what reminds me of this pretty spectacular career that Reba's had.
Oh, I love that. Are there?
I'm going to pull out from 1 Corinthians. I'm living ding. I talk about, I don't know if you know this, Colton, but I've been reading the Corinthian letters in depth for basically as long as
I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. I was hoping.
Good. Okay, so you're caught up.
I knew that.
I'm pleased to announce that I'm almost done with chapter 11 of 2 Corinthians. Like the end is nigh, and then it's Galatians.
Watch out, Deuces.
Yeah, watch out, Deuces. But anyways, 1 Corinthians 4, Paul talks about, or maybe it's 1 Corinthians earlier than that. I don't know. He talks about Apollos, or I planted, Apollos watered, God gives the growth. And it's Reba is not the conversation. She's the queen of country, but there's empresses or duchesses, or rather just all people tending this, and therefore it's a bigger expanse than she is not the arbiter of country music, nor is she limited to it. Whoever's in New England, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, Reba as Apollos.
Ooh, that's nice.
Or as the Apostle Paul, but I don't want to put that on her.
Oh no, don't do that to her. Yeah, don't do that to our beloved Reba. So my final answer is Reba is the Tower of Babel. That Reba has brought together languages and cultures and thoughts and music and everything and dispersed it in such a way that it still all feels connected. And it still leads back to the thing that she is trying to do, which is she's a performer at heart. It still all connects back to her, but she has a way in which she gifts that story and lets it go free to live elsewhere. And I think at its best, the Tower of Babel calls us into that same space, that we have a singular kind of primary focus back on what was and what we came from, but that we have been given the gift of taking that story or that music or that culture, whatever it is, and going into a new path and forging our own way. And I think that Reba's music, being as prolific as it is and as influential as it has been, because if you listen to newer country stars, they point back to the Dollys and the Rebas that brought them up. And I think that is the web and network and family tree and history that comes with the Tower, and comes also with someone like Reba and all of the work that she does.
I love it.
That's me.
Friends, we're cognizant of the time, and we are at the end of our episode. Colton Lott, thank you very much for joining us on 2-on-1 today. The Reverend Colton Lott is one of our contributors to Are You Still Watching? Using pop culture to tune in, find God, and get renewed for another season, coming out from Chalice Press on October 25th. You can pre-order it right now at chalicepress.com. While you're using the internet machine on the World Wide Web, head on over to jeffwunrow.com, jeffwunrow.com. Use our special promo code 2on115 for 15% off your entire Stole order. Ooh, I sound like a professional podcaster, don't I, Spiff?
You do. Looking, we're at 115 episodes at this point. We're finally getting it down.
We're finally getting it down. But on behalf of the 2-on-1 Project, that's it for now. I'm the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm the Reverend Stephanie Kendall.
And I'm the Reverend Colton Lott.
Yeah, hey, all right. See you next time, Deuces. Get more 2-on-1 at 2on1project.com.